especially over these last few years, about the topic of emotional intelligence, EQ. We've been hearing about empathetic leadership and how to lead better in that realm. And so we brought in today someone who is a friend of the CMAA and community. Sara Mueller is with us today. She's awesome. She helps a lot of leaders in the club world and beyond enhance their emotional intelligence so they can be better and more impactful at work and home. She underwent her own emotional intelligence journey. We're going to ask her to speak a little bit about that. Bottom line is she is well qualified for this topic after her own work, her work at Harvard University, Florida State University, and Conscious Coaching Institute. So we're excited to hear more about that. And without further ado, I want to give a great virtual round of applause and welcome to Sara Mueller. Sara, welcome to the Extraordinary Leader Program.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm so excited to be here with all of you and see all of your bright faces on Zoom. I'd love to get a sense from those of you who are on this call if you are familiar with emotional intelligence and what it is. So if you are pretty familiar with emotional intelligence, if you could just give me a thumbs up, that would give me some insight into who I'm speaking to and the level of understanding. So some ups and downs, some thumbs ups, no thumbs. Okay. Good. So we're going to get on the same page and I will share with you what emotional intelligence is. And we are, as Shelley and Kevin mentioned, going to have the Q&A part after I share some information with you so that I can really speak to what it is that you want to know more about being an impactful leader using EQ. But first, I want to tell you, as Shelley started to introduce, a little bit about why me. Why am I here? Why have I dedicated my career to helping private clubs and the hospitality industry to enhance their emotional intelligence so that they can have a culture of leadership that really supports an excellent member experience? Well, as Shelley said, I was sort of kicked or pushed into my own EQ journey about 10 years ago. I was really burnt out in my career. I had a big time corporate job that was flying me around North America and Europe, teaching and creating training programs for the service industry. And it was demanding and it burnt me out. And I thought that the job was what was causing me to be so stressed out. So I quit the job and I went to go teach yoga full time, thinking that a more peaceful, a more Zen-like job would be the answer to all of my stress and burnout. But what I found after just a couple months of teaching yoga full time is that I was still as stressed out as ever. And really the only thing that had changed was that my paycheck was now a lot smaller. And it was right around this time that my husband and I hit a rock bottom in my marriage. Some of you might know my husband. He's actually here on this call. And he's in the private club space, which is another reason that I know and love this industry so intimately. But we hit a rock bottom in our marriage. And I wanted to, point my finger at him and I wanted to blame him for how I was feeling. But I took a deep breath and I had sort of a conscious moment and I recognized that, I was the common denominator in all of these things that weren't working in my life. And so I made a choice, which is perhaps one of the most important choices that we can make if we want to have success in both our personal and our professional lives. I chose to take 100% responsibility for all of the outcomes of my life. And so I took that finger that was pointing at my husband and I turned it back on myself. And I went through an intense emotional intelligence journey. I worked with business and mindset coaches. I worked with therapists and mindfulness teachers, and I started to change and started to understand my strengths and my weaknesses and what was holding me back from having joy and success in my life. I loved it so much that I went on, as Shelley had mentioned, and studied EQ at Harvard and FSU, and am now teaching it to folks like yourselves, who I'm very grateful for the opportunity to. What happened when I went through that emotional intelligence journey is I realized that I actually was in a job that was aligned with my strengths and my values. So I went back to that demanding corporate job that I thought was causing all of my stress, but this time with a new set of skills and these new emotional intelligence understanding, I was a lot more successful there. I worked less hours. I had a higher profit share, and I really had fun with my team and was able to connect with them and build more rapport with them. So EQ, really helped me in my professional life. It also helped me in my personal life because both Michael and I went on our own EQ journey, and we came back together and were able to heal our marriage and, be here on the same call today with two beautiful boys and a life that we love. And, I don't want you just to take my word for it and hear from my experience. I hope it does inspire you, but I want to share some data with you as to why you should care about emotional intelligence. Let me pull up some slides for you quickly. All right, let's jump to this one. There we go. We'll jump on through. So these are a little bit of data that I pulled from resources like Harvard and Yale and Learning in Action, some very reputable, of course, resources. But really, over the last couple decades, there has been a lot more studying of emotional intelligence. We'll dive into exactly what this is in just a moment. But their data has shown that emotional intelligence is really the key success factor for leadership success, both personally and professionally. And some of the data that I chose to share with you here is that those who work in a high EQ environment are negatively correlated to burnout. Those who work for a high EQ leader are 400% less likely to leave a job. And we know how important that is working in the private club and hospitality industry that has one of the highest levels of turnover among all industries. Your team is 50% more inspired if they are working for a high EQ leader. We also know that this is important in today's age where the workforce is wanting some sort of purpose or some sort of passion beyond just a paycheck. They want to feel like they belong. They want to feel valued. They want to grow. And it's these high EQ leaders that pull that and pull the greatness out of their team so they feel inspired and they want to keep working at that organization or at your club. Even things as simple, not simple, but even things as straightforward as a 50% decrease in accidents that count for lost time, better decision-making without anxiety, a stronger customer experience, which we're all concerned about creating that best member experience that we can, more revenue and more productivity. So there's a lot of data behind these studies that show that EQ is that magic skill that helps us to create results like this. And I want to share a little bit with you as to why. So, all of you are on this call because you are successful in your career. You have the intelligence, the smarts. We have to have a certain level of intelligence to be successful in our career. We also have to have that certain level of technical and functional skills. So for you, that might be, understanding what hospitality is and how to make members feel a certain way. It might be skills like operating a club management software system. It might be something like understanding how much food to order for a banquet or how much to spread out tea times at your club. These are all technical and functional skills that, of course, are important for you as a leader. And what often happens is we perform because we're smart and we have a grasp of these technical and functional skills, and then we get promoted into a leadership role. A lot of times, though, we don't have the people skills or the leadership training that then helps us, because once we get into that leadership role, it's no longer about the technical and functional skills for you specifically. Instead, you are managing and influencing others who have to perform those technical and functional skills. And so emotional intelligence or people skills, or some people call them soft skills, even though there's nothing soft about EQ. This is where we really get into, a lot of what you're learning about with Shelley and Kevin as well in this program. This is how we create success as a leader working with other human beings. And so let's move into defining EQ so that we're all on the same page. Simply put, emotional intelligence is your ability to know and understand yourself so that you can better understand, communicate, and influence others. And there are 4 pillars of emotional intelligence. I'm going to briefly walk you through what each of those 4 pillars are, and then we're going to dive into a couple more of them during our time together today. So this journey of emotional intelligence is a linear journey, meaning we have to start in the first pillar and build our skills and sort of master this pillar before we move on to the rest of the pillars of EQ. And this is really in line with this month with the Extraordinary Leader being about self-leadership. So the first pillar of EQ, as you can see here on my slides, is self-awareness. This is your ability to have an accurate perception of yourself. Do you see yourself as your team and the members and the board of directors see you? Do you know your values and your strengths and also your weaknesses so that you're leading from your values, you're leveraging your strengths, and you have those team members to make up for any weaknesses that you might have? It's also about understanding your patterns and having emotional vocabulary, which we will talk about in a little bit. So once we understand ourselves, we understand what makes us tick and what also kind of leads us down the path of blocking us from success, then we can move into the second pillar of EQ, which is self-management. And self-management is really where resilience is. When we talk about resilience, and resilience is one of the areas that I studied at FSU, self-management and resilience go hand in hand. You know, we in the private club space face a lot of change and a lot of adversity, and that can be a big kind of change like experiencing Hurricane Ian, which a lot of the clubs that I work with here in South Florida went through. Or it could be a different kind of change, like implementing a new club management software and the change that is required for that. So with self-management, we have the resilience to take on whatever is thrown at us regarding change or stress. And as I'm sure you know, your industry is one of the highest stressed industries of all of them. And so really this self-management pillar is where we start to manage our stress so that we can show up effectively, sustainably. This is also where your productivity comes in and you be your best self and you sort of pull out the best of those that you manage as well when you're helping them to build their self-management. Self-management is about going for your long-term goals rather than giving into instant gratification. So my husband and I love the show Yellowstone and really any of the shows from Taylor Sheridan. And when I'm watching that show, you know, all I want to do is keep pressing play and continue watching another episode, not, you know, minding what time it is because I'm so enthralled in the show. Well, giving in and watching episode after episode of Yellowstone until 2 a.m, you know, doesn't serve me when I have to wake up the next morning and be alive and energetic to come here and speak with all of you on this Zoom call. It doesn't serve you if you have to be with your team and spark that energy that all of your team feeds off of you as the leader. So self-management is about saying, okay, I really like this show, but I'm just going to watch 1, maybe 2 episodes, and then I'm going to go get a good night's sleep because I know that tomorrow I need to be in a better headspace. We're going to talk more about both self-awareness and self-management on this call because the focus of your month for the Extraordinary Leader is self-leadership. But I want to give you a brief overview of what the third and the fourth pillars of EQ are as well. So once we understand and know ourselves and we effectively manage ourselves for sustainable high performance and balance, we move into the third pillar of EQ, which is others awareness. So this, you know, if I were to pick just one word to describe this pillar, it would be empathy. It would be your ability to put yourself in the shoes of your staff, in the shoes of your members, in the shoes of your board of directors, so that you are understanding where they might be coming from, so you're better able to meet them where they're at and motivate and influence them. It's understanding what motivates your team. Every single person that you manage has different drivers for why they're working. And it's your job as a leader to understand what that is and help align their identity with those drivers to really pull out their best from them and keep them wanting to work at your club. Others awareness is also about understanding the dynamics of your club. It's about the organizational dynamics and politics and communication methods that are regular so that you're working within those systems. Once we then master that others awareness, we move into the next and final pillar of emotional intelligence, which is relationship management. And this is really where leadership happens. This is the leadership pillar. This is where you are being a leader that's leading from inspiration, versus fear, which was really that, that old school 20th century style of leadership that has changed. And especially when you are leading a team that is their responsibility to go out there and smile and provide a hospitable experience for your members, you don't want someone that's scared. You want someone that's inspired to be their best. So this pillar is where you're inspiring, you're mentoring, you're coaching, you're having those tough love conversations that are necessary to give your team feedback, to grow and improve, and to shift behavior that isn't working for your club's mission. This is really the heart of communication and impactful leadership. So I want to share a few misconceptions about EQ before we start diving into the first pillar. And, some people think that emotional intelligence means you're just nice and you're always smiling and you're being really nice to people. Well, that's not what EQ is. I'm going to explain a little bit more about that in a moment. It's not smiling and being nice. And it's also not saying, hey, I'm supposed to use my emotions. I'm mad. I'm going to be so mad at you. It's not doing that either. It's not giving that free rein to whatever comes up for you. EQ instead is about managing your emotions so that they don't hijack your well-intended behavior. They don't hijack what you want to create as a leader. EQ is also not the opposite of IQ. They are unrelated, except for some people with higher IQ tend to have higher EQ because they have a larger emotional vocabulary. And then finally, EQ is not the same as your personality. What we know from psychological research is that your personality is pretty static most of your life. It doesn't change very much. But EQ is absolutely something that you can change, that you can grow. It's like a muscle. You can build it and you can continue building it your whole leadership career. And so let's jump into some of the ways that we can start building our EQ, no matter where you're at, no matter if you already feel like you're a really great high EQ leader, or if you're getting some ideas on how you can pull out a higher EQ in your teammates. Let's start with pillar 1, self-awareness. The problem with this pillar is that this is some data that the Urich group that studies self-awareness found when they researched with thousands of their research participants. They found that 95% of the research participants said that they were self-aware, but when they asked their colleagues and they had them take the assessment, they found that really only 10 to 15% of them actually were. So there's a lot of delusion happening between our self-awareness and how self-aware we might really be. And I just share that because that's an opportunity for you to say, where might my blind spots be? Where's that little nugget of information that I can take from our session today and from working with Shelley and Kevin that's going to help me notch up my leadership by one step? Let's look for that gap that we can start to close as we do this work together. The next thing that's a problem about the self-awareness pillar is that emotional vocabulary is really important for us to be self-aware. We have to be able to understand what we are experiencing and what emotions we're having so that we can support ourselves or so we can support our team. Now, Brené Brown is a researcher who studies emotions. She's a researcher for the University of Houston. And when she was studying emotions for one of her recent books called Atlas of the Heart, she and her team also researched with thousands of participants, and they wanted to find out how many emotions the average human being could name that they experience regularly. So what she identified in this book is that there are 87 emotions that we as humans can experience in the human experience. And so out of these 87 emotions that we can experience every day, what do you think was the average number that the average person in their research study could name? I'm going to see if there's any. If you want to drop it, let's have some chat dropping if I can pull that up. Or maybe hold up your fingers. Oh, there we go. Now I can see the chat. So John Harris says 5 to 10. Danielle says 15. Brett says that the average person can name 30 out of 87. James says 10. Gail says 8. Jeff says 2. So Shelley says 3 to 4. Yes. So we're getting close. I can tell that you've been paying attention. The average number was 3. when they were researching with the participants, the average human can name 3 emotions that they feel regularly, essentially happy, sad, and pissed off, upset, whatever you might want, however you might want to describe that one. And the reason that this is important for us to know as leaders who are, wanting to be our best selves, but also wanting to pull out the best from our team, is that we can support and we can take action from different feelings. A lot of us, and what I hear often as a coach is, I'm stressed, I'm so stressed, I'm just so stressed. And everyone says, I'm so stressed. But what is the feeling or the emotion behind that stress? Because if one of my teammates comes to me and says, well, I'm so overwhelmed right now, I'm going to respond differently. If someone comes to me and says, I'm so frustrated at this right now, I'm going to respond differently. If someone says, my feelings were kind of hurt that no one took the idea in our last meeting seriously, I'm going to respond differently. And so as we can start to coach our team to really share what's going on with them, then we can offer support for what's really happening. Go on to the next slide. Here we go. Related to this is that, we can experience 87 emotions as part of the human experience, but a lot of us don't want to. A lot of us don't like the way that our feelings feel. And you're probably even thinking, well, why were we even talking about feelings on this leadership call? Why does it matter? Well, I hope that as you continue learning about emotional intelligence, you understand why it matters. But understand that a lot of us treat our feelings like a balloon. So you can see the balloon here on my screen and also in the slides. A feeling comes along that maybe we don't want to feel, something like anger or anxiety. And instead of feeling that feeling and then acting on it in a way that supports us, like let's say one of your staff members says something to you that upsets you in a team meeting, oftentimes instead of addressing it privately with them after the meeting, we stew about it, we ruminate about it, we avoid that person, we gossip about it. And in between that, stimulus and then the finally dealing with it, if we even finally deal with it, there's a lot of time and emotional baggage that has happened. So back to the beach ball example. If we don't deal with that emotion when it comes up, it's like trying to shove a beach ball down underneath the water. And so, can I shove this ball under the water? I got some no's. So I can shove this ball down underneath the water if I was at a pool, but I would have to keep both of my hands there in order to keep it there. Because what happens if the water pressure gets too big or I let go of my hands? Right? The ball goes flying up into the air. It comes up out sideways, and it hits someone in the face, or it breaks a window, or it splashes someone. And then we have a huge mess to clean up. And this is what happens when we don't observe our feelings and then act on them in the workplace or at home. They eventually come out sideways. Maybe 10 days later, when you yell at one of your team members, or you tell a member to be quiet, or whatever it is, because you've been shoving down that feeling for so long, or maybe even it even comes out 10 years later in the form of an illness. So when we look at the illnesses that people in North America experience, 90 to 95% of them are related to stress. And so when we're shoving these feelings down and forgetting about them, we're creating stress in our body and also in our mental health. And so what we want to do, as my Harvard professor says, is we want to view our feelings as data, or we want to view our feelings as messengers. Because as I said earlier, sharing that one of the earlier slides with you, when we can say how we're feeling, we can then act on it. If I'm feeling resentful, well, that means that there's probably a boundary that I need to put up or that someone crossed. If I am feeling joy, well, that means that I love this work that I'm doing and I'm going to want to get involved in more projects like this at work. If I'm feeling guilt, well, that means that I should have perhaps made a different choice in the past, and that teaches me on what I want to do different. And as leaders, we're continuing to grow and evolve, and these feelings can give us that indication of where we want to go and where we want to put our compass to lead to. So our feelings are neutral. They're not good or bad. They're part of the human experience, and they allow us to move forward. And if we manage the feeling, if we deal with it, it doesn't have that opportunity to as easily jump out and take us hostage later and hijack our intended behavior as a leader. This is a slide that is going to wrap up this first pillar of self-awareness with you. I'm not going to read all of these to you, and I do have a way that you can access my slides that I'll share with you at the end of our call today. And I'll also bring this back up maybe when we get into our Q&A in case you want me to go into any of these any further. But these are some ways beyond what we've spoken about so far that you can begin to increase your self-awareness. The one that I want to just speak to you about briefly here is one of the last bullet point that's about asking for feedback. So part of our building of our self-awareness is to understand what our blind spots are and to understand how others perceive us. And so this is an example of me, as difficult as this is, it would be for me to take this video and sit down and, I've got to listen to myself speak and watch it. I'm going to do that afterwards so that I can grow, so I can see how I can improve. So one of the ways that we can build our self-awareness is to regularly ask for feedback and get that in different ways that we can. And again, if you want me to address any of these areas in more detail, we can talk about that during the Q&A. So let's move into self-management. So once we understand and once we know ourselves, we get to move into making those choices in the moment that are in line with our aspirational self of how we want to show up as a leader. This is a challenging pillar for me to teach at times because a lot of what we can do to have effective self-management are things that we already know we should be doing. Things like getting a good night's sleep and working out regularly and eating well and learning how to relax and taking time off when we can. All of these contribute to self-management so that we can be sustainable in a high-performance setting that's required of us at our clubs. Yet we don't always do these things that we know are good for us. And there's a few reasons why. One is that we forget that rest and recovery is part of a sustainable high performance. I know that I really had to learn that it was okay for me to chill out and watch a movie at nighttime. I felt like I always had to be doing something in order to be productive and in order to prove my worth. But I like to look at our lives as a race car. We're a race car driver. And so we get out on that path and we give it our best and we go as fast as we can. We show up as best as we can. And then we pull over, we take the pit stops and we get the tires filled up and our team checks on us and we get gas put in our tank. And then we get back on the racetrack and we go again. And so we need to take those regular moments of refueling and look at it as part of productivity versus a waste of time where I'm being a slacker, which is how I used to view myself when I wanted to rest or I knew that I needed some time off. One of the other ways that we hold ourselves back from, doing the self-care and the taking good care of ourselves that's essential for self-management and being a high EQ leader is that we get stuck in what I call permeating patterns. And so these are more of mental or mindset challenges that hold us back from being the highly impactful leader that we have the capability to be. And I'm going to share with you just a couple of what these permeating patterns are. The first one that I want to share with you is what I call head hurricanes. And I recognized that I was having a head hurricane when I was texting my friend, Vicky. She has kids that are a very similar age of my boys. And I sent her a text message saying, hey, Vicky, do you and the kids want to come over for a happy hour play date? And Vicky is one of those people that's really quick on her phone. She usually responds within 30 minutes max. So when an hour went by and Vicky didn't respond to my play date text invitation, I started to think, I wonder what's going on. But it was a work day, so I tried to focus back on my work and continue on. And then another hour passed. And I thought, that's strange. I wonder if I did something to make Vicky mad at me. And then another hour passed. Oh my gosh, I forgot to ask Vicky about how her mother-in-law was doing last time I saw her. Man, how could I have forgotten that? I'm so self-centered. And then another hour passes. oh my gosh, why am I having such troubles maintaining these friendships? I'm such a bad friend. And so I'm in this space in my head, and it's this hurricane that's going on and on and on. And do you think I'm getting anything done at work? I'm pretty distracted. I'm also very distracted from my family and that precious time that I have with them. And so one of the ways that we get out of these head hurricanes that can be about both personal or professional things is we want to look at the neutral facts. And so if I look at the experience with my friend Vicky, the neutral facts were that I sent her an invitation and she hadn't responded. Everything else was made up, a hurricane in my head. Pausing to look for the neutral facts helps us to come back to the situation that is in front of us. You know, let's say we are leaders. Let's say one of our new food and beverage managers is showing up late for work, and you just hired them and you're so excited. You think they have a lot of potential at your club, but they're showing up late for work. And you start to think, well, that's strange. You know, I really thought this person cared about the job. I didn't think this person was lazy. I really thought I was better at recruiting and deciding who should be on the team. Gosh, what am I even doing in this position anyways? So one thing happens and we start to ruminate, and it takes up our brain space when we should be looking for opportunities for excellence at work and for leading our team. And if I were to approach this team member, this new food and beverage manager who was showing up late, and say, I can't believe you don't care. I really thought you were going to work out here. If I were to approach with the head hurricane, first of all, that person's going to be like, whoa, what's going on? And they are probably not going to want to keep working for me anymore. They're going to be even more stressed, even if they were just being late. Instead, we want to approach that conversation with the neutral facts and say something like, hey, I'm so glad that you're on this team. We both want you to be successful here. I see that you've been showing up late for work the last couple weeks. Can you help me understand what's going on here? And so when we ask questions as a leader from neutral facts, we can then help with what the answer is. Let's say this late food and beverage manager said, yes, well, you know, my partner has been in the hospital the last week and I've had to be in charge of getting the kids to school. Or let's say this food and beverage manager was saying, well, yes, I've been at Starbucks every morning interviewing a new wine sommelier. And I thought you wanted me to hire a new sommelier. And so we need to get to the neutral facts so that we can lead from that versus the head hurricanes. I'm going to share one, maybe two more with you, and then we'll wrap it up for questions. The second permeating pattern that gets us stuck is what I call a murky mindset. And so you are in the service industry, you're creating a great experience for your members. You have to deal with a lot of negativity and complaints. You know, you're the person that your members come to when something's not right or something's not working. And what we want to do is we want to make sure that we're filling our cup with positivity so that when that negativity comes to us, we're not responding in a way that we're going to later regret. And there are two types of associations that impact whether we have a clear, bright, positive mindset or whether we have what I call a murky mindset. The first is what we listen to, what we watch, what we read, basically any of the media that we consume. Before we had children, my husband and I had two fur babies that were golden retrievers. And I, of course, loved spending time with them and walking them. And I took them out for a walk one night and noticed that a car drove by me very slowly. And I didn't think too much of it at first. You know, I was out with my dogs having a good time, so I kept on my walk. And I noticed that that car drove by again. This time I started to get a little concerned. What I then noticed is that that car drove by a third time. And I got freaked out. So I grabbed the dogs, I ran into our house, I closed the doors, I locked the windows, I was peeking through the blinds, and I called my husband and I explained to him what was happening because he was at work. And that car drove by one more time. But this time I had a conscious moment and I noticed that inside the car, were 3 boys who were teenagers. They were not eyeing me or looking me up and down. Instead, they were laughing with one another, and they were probably trying to figure out which house they were going to toilet paper. But my mind went to a different story. My mind went to them being murderers or rapists, because my favorite TV show to watch at that time was CSI Miami. I was binge watching CSI Miami, where all of this murder and these crimes were happening. And so that's what I thought was happening in front of me. Luckily, I recognized that, and I still watch CSI Miami every once in a while, but I shift what I started putting into my brain, knowing that that creates the way that I look at the world. You know, things like news that uses a lot of anger and fear to get us to keep its attention. And even, people that we hang out with that might not be as positive as we want to be. Our associations impact the way that we show up in our world. And so this is a little bit of data for you, but it essentially says that who you hang out with, who you choose for your peer group, influences who you are and how you show up. The data here is specific to obesity and divorce. And I want you to understand that, it's so great that you're involved with CMAA and you're surrounding yourself by positive leaders who want to be up to big things and who want to be fantastic leaders. That's the kind of input that we want to get into our brains so that we don't have that murky mindset. And then the final permeating pattern that I'll share with you today is a bogus belief. And these are, lies that we believe are the truth about ourselves. These can be things like imposter syndrome and feeling like we got our job out of luck or connections versus merit. This could be something like feeling like I'm not good enough, and so I'm overworking and over people pleasing in order to prove my worth. Any of these beliefs really impact the way that we work. And if I think about my own life and my own experience, one of the bogus beliefs that I had before I did the work of emotional intelligence was this feeling of, I am not wanted. And that showed up in my life by me, only putting one foot in the door of my marriage, because I was afraid that if my husband one day thought that he didn't want me, that my heart would break. And I thought it would hurt less if I only put one foot in the door of my marriage. This I am not wanted belief showed up in high school and college, where I did a lot of drugs and I partied a lot because I thought that would give me friends and make people want me. It also showed up at work, where I worked way more hours than any of my colleagues who were in the same role as me. And I didn't ask for help, even when my managers offered it to me, because I'm going to show them how strong of a performer I am to prove that I'm wanted here. So I was really burning myself out with this bogus belief versus being able to perform at a sustainable high performance productivity rate. And so the way that we move past these bogus beliefs is to, first of all, notice them. We all have them. I've coached people at all levels, from very junior to very senior executives. And these bogus beliefs pop up often when we're making sort of an up level in our life, or moving on to a higher level of leadership or into a new project. So first we notice that it's there. And then what I ask you and invite you to do is to really amplify your truth, to recognize that, through this extraordinary leader program that you're doing, through the work that you do with CMAA, you've got the tools, you've got access to them, you've got them inside of you, and you also have been really successful in the past. And if we look at resilience, if we look at pulling out resilience in our team, this is the top thing that we can do beyond encouraging our team to, get a good night's sleep and eat well and take care of their bodies, is helping them remember when they've been resilient in the past, when they've gone through adversity and won, when they have faced something that was challenging and came out on the other side, personally or professionally. Because, implementing a new club management system might be something that everyone on your team has never done before, but they've probably done similar projects that have been successful in the past. So we amplify the truth in order to overcome that bogus belief that often holds us back or keeps us stuck. So again, these are some tips for increasing self-management, and you can grab my slides. I'll share how to do that at the end of our call today. And if you want me to talk a little bit more about what some of these look like, I'm happy to share, but I'm going to pause now and, really just kind of wrap up what we've talked about. We only hit half of EQ because this is the month of self-leadership. So I wanted to really focus on those and know that the journey can continue as you move into the others awareness and relationship